After World War II, concern about growing threats to the environment began to rise. In the 50s, homes, cars, roads were being built like never before. The material standard of living was rising, and technological development had taken a significant leap forward. However, the environment was significantly damaged by increasing waste of all kinds, pollution, increased use of agricultural and industrial chemicals, and so on. First problem that drove international attention was the problem of acid rain in the 60s. The issue of acid rains was particularly urgent for Sweden and Norway because of the long-range transport air pollutants that passed in number over their territory, as well as the pollution of the highly industrialized neighbors, primarily Great Britain and Germany. The UN General Assembly accepted Sweden's argument for an international conference on the environment, which led to the UN Conference on the Human Environment held in Stockholm in 1972. The conference resulted in adoption of the Stockholm Declaration that addressed the such topics as natural resources, wildlife, pollution, renewable and non-renewable resources, environmental research and education, and so on. One of the greatest achievements was the inclusion of the principle which stated that states has the sovereign right to exploit their own resources, but that this must not be detrimental to the environment of other states. The conference was a major step because it set the primary framework of international environmental law. However, it also revealed a predicament for a prompt solution to the environmental problem, the potential conflict between economic development and environmental protection. Developing countries were especially concerned that international effort to protect the environment damaged by industrialized countries would come at the expense of their own development. The concept of sustainable development as a global priority was formulated in the 80s. Perhaps the greatest contribution was made by the Brundtland Commission. The World Commission on Environment and Development, also known as the Brundtland Commission, was created in 1983 and was chaired by former Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was selected for this position because of her background in medicine, public health, and environment. The main goal of the Brundtland Commission was to develop ways to properly address environmental problems in the long term, as the contradiction between economic growth and the environment, revealed during the Stockholm Conference, had still not been properly addressed. The Commission's most significant contribution was the report Our Common Future, published in 1987. This publication developed the concept of sustainable development, briefly described for the first time in the 1980 World Conservation Strategy. It promoted the idea that current economic development should not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It thus reconciled the economic growth-environment dilemma. It suggested a holistic approach to the environment, to look at it not as a separate part, but as a subject interconnected with social and economic dimensions. Another important milestone was the United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development in 1992, also known as the Rio Conference or the Earth Summit. Many important topics like biodiversity, alternative sources of energy, limited water resources, poisonous waste, just to name a few, were addressed during the conference. The conference resulted in the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, Agenda 21, establishment of the Commission on Sustainable Development, the Framework Convention on the Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the UN Convention to Combat Desertification were open for signature. Subsequent international fora such as the Millennium Summit, the World Summit on Sustainable Development in South Africa in 2002, the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro in 2012, have advanced international action on sustainable development. All these led to adoption in 2015 by all United Nations member states the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At its heart are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. These goals are aimed at addressing the most acute global problems like climate change, hunger, biodiversity, education, gender equality, economic growth, and so on. Thus, sustainable development become one of the core aspects of today's international agenda.